Park Ranger found a strange whirlpool in a lake, but what was beneath the bottom changed everything. Mist hovered just above the surface, curling around the tall pine trees that bordered the shore. The smell of damp earth and pine needles filled the air, and the occasional call of a distant bird echoed across the water. It was the kind of morning that made most people pause, take a deep breath, and feel grateful for the stillness of nature. For Ethan Moore, however, this morning was not about calm reflection. Ethan was a park ranger, a job he had loved since he was a teenager. He had grown up near Silverpine Lake, and the forest had always been a second home to him. He knew every trail, every hidden cove, and every bend in the river that fed the lake. He had spent countless hours walking along the shores, inspecting the park's facilities, and making sure visitors were safe. On most days, his routine was predictable. Check the trail signs, inspect the boat docks, make a note of any fallen trees or debris, and report anything unusual. But this morning, as Ethan walked along the familiar eastern shore, something caught his eye that made him stop dead in his tracks. At first, it looked like a small ripple in the water. Ethan squinted, tilting his head to get a better look. But ripples didn't move like this. The water was spinning, slowly at first, but growing larger, forming a whirlpool in the middle of the lake. It wasn't huge, not like a storm at sea, but it was unnaturally perfect, a circle that seemed almost deliberate, as if someone or something had stirred the lake from below. Ethan's heart began to beat faster. He had seen whirlpools before, but never here, never in Silverpine Lake. The lake had always been calm, peaceful, and predictable. This was different. Ethan's curiosity overcame his caution. He pulled out his phone and snapped a few pictures, then grabbed his drone from the back of his truck. He was careful to launch it quietly, not wanting to disturb the water or attract attention from early morning hikers who sometimes came to the lake for a sunrise view. The drone rose into the sky, hovering above the whirlpool. Its camera gave Ethan a perfect view from above, and what he saw made him frown. The water swirled faster near the center, and there seemed to be a slight vortex pulling in small debris, leaves, twigs, and even a few floating pine cones. Ethan scratched his head. He had a scientific mind, and he knew that whirlpools could be caused by water flowing in and out through underground channels, by sudden changes in water temperature, or by strong winds pushing the surface. But nothing in Silverpine Lake's history suggested any of these causes. There were no underground springs that could produce such force, the weather had been calm for weeks, and the water temperature was consistent throughout. Something was unusual, and that fact made Ethan both anxious and excited. He took a step closer to the water's edge. The whirlpool seemed to respond to his presence, the water spinning faster as if acknowledging the human observer. Ethan shook his head, trying to calm himself. He reminded himself that there was probably a simple explanation. Maybe a beaver had created a new underwater dam, redirecting the current in ways he couldn't see. Maybe the wind patterns had combined with something beneath the surface. But deep down, he knew that this was no ordinary whirlpool. There was something strange about it, something almost deliberate, as if the lake itself was hiding a secret. Ethan decided to document everything carefully. He pulled out a notebook and started recording observations. The time, the weather conditions, the water temperature, and the location of the whirlpool. He measured the diameter of the swirl as best he could from the shore and noted the speed at which the water was rotating. Every detail mattered because in his experience, even small observations could reveal the truth behind a natural phenomenon. But no matter how many notes he took, the whirlpool continued to mystify him. By now, the sun had risen fully, casting a warm glow over the lake. Light reflected off the water in dazzling patterns, and the mist had begun to fade. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine despite the warm sunlight. There was something about the whirlpool that felt alive, almost like it was watching him. He frowned again. It was silly, he knew. Water didn't watch anyone, yet the feeling persisted and he couldn't shake it. He glanced around the empty shoreline, half expecting to see someone, or something, emerging from the trees, but the forest remained silent. Ethan decided to take a closer look. He removed his boots and carefully waded into the shallows, letting the cold water soak his pants. The whirlpool was a short distance away, still spinning relentlessly. He could feel the current tugging at his feet, though it was weak enough that he could maintain his balance. He dropped a small stick into the water, watching as it was pulled toward the center and disappeared beneath the surface. His heart raced. This was not a minor anomaly. The whirlpool had power. Something beneath the lake was moving the water in ways he couldn't explain. Feeling both cautious and determined, Ethan returned to the shore and pulled out his sonar equipment, a device he used occasionally to check the lake for unusual underwater formations or debris that could pose a hazard. He attached the sonar sensor to a rope and lowered it into the water near the whirlpool. The readings appeared on the small screen, and Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. Something large lay beneath the lake bed, hidden under layers of mud and silt. The shape was unlike a rock, a fallen tree, or any natural feature. It was geometric, precise, and massive. Ethan leaned closer, squinting at the screen. He had worked with sonar before, and he knew what he was seeing. This was not a natural formation. Whatever it was, it had been buried for decades, possibly longer. He felt a shiver of excitement mixed with fear. What could be down there? Was it something man-made, a forgotten piece of machinery, or something far older, something that had been hidden away for a reason? He knew he needed help. One man could not explore this alone. He decided to call his supervisor, Clara Jennings, who had been a park ranger longer than he had been alive. Clara had experience with unusual discoveries, and her expertise could provide insight into whether this was a simple accident or something extraordinary. He also considered calling local historians or scientists, but he didn't want to create a panic. For now, he would document, observe, and gather as much information as possible before revealing the full extent of the discovery. While he waited for Clara, Ethan couldn't resist another look at the whirlpool. He pulled his drone back into the air, circling it slowly, capturing video from every angle. From above, the spiral was hypnotic, and he noticed something he hadn't before. The water at the center appeared darker, almost black, as if something below was absorbing the sunlight. His pulse quickened. This was no ordinary underwater obstruction. Something lay beneath the mud and water that had changed the lake in ways no one had noticed. Hours passed. Birds flew over the forest, their calls echoing across the lake. Sunlight moved across the water, reflecting off the surface and creating shimmering patterns. Yet the whirlpool remained, constant and mysterious. Ethan sat on the shore, notebook in hand, trying to make sense of it all. He sketched the swirl, wrote down his thoughts, and even made a rough map of the area. Every instinct told him that this was only the beginning. When Clara finally arrived, she walked briskly to the water's edge, eyes widening as she saw the whirlpool. "Ethan, what in the world?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. Ethan explained what he had seen, the sonar readings, and his observations. Clara nodded slowly, her expression serious. "We need to be careful. This could be dangerous, but it could also be important. We're not dealing with a simple natural event here." Together, they stood in silence for a moment, watching the water spin endlessly. The lake seemed ordinary in every other way, calm shores, gentle waves, and the forest standing tall around it. But beneath the surface, a secret waited, silent and hidden, ready to challenge everything Ethan thought he knew about Silver Pine Lake. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky with orange and purple streaks, Ethan and Clara had made a decision. They would return the next day with more equipment, carefully plan their investigation, and uncover the truth about the whirlpool and whatever lay beneath. For Ethan, the ordinary routine of a park ranger's life had ended that morning. The lake had whispered a secret, and he had heard it. As they drove back to the ranger station, Ethan kept glancing at the rearview mirror, imagining the whirlpool, imagining what might be beneath the water. Sleep would not come easily that night. His mind raced with possibilities, scientific, historical, and something else, something he could not yet name. Silver Pine Lake was hiding something remarkable, and Ethan Moore was the first to see it in decades, maybe even centuries. The next morning, the air was crisp, and the sky was painted in soft shades of pink and gold once again. Silver Pine Lake lay quiet, a gentle mist hovering above the water, making it look like a silver mirror. Ethan Moore had arrived early, even earlier than the day before. He had not slept much, his mind racing with questions about the whirlpool and the mysterious object lying beneath the lake. Everything about it was unusual, and he was determined to understand it. Ethan's first task was to gather the equipment he would need for a proper investigation. He loaded his truck with diving gear, ropes, sonar equipment, waterproof cameras, and a small boat that could handle the lake's shallow areas safely. Clara Jennings had agreed to help, bringing along extra safety gear and her own set of tools. They knew this was not a simple observation. They were stepping into something that could be far more complicated than they had imagined. By the time they reached the eastern shore, the sun was rising higher, warming the water and slowly dissipating the mist. The whirlpool was still there, spinning gently, its center darker than the surrounding water. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. It had not stopped. In fact, it seemed almost as if the whirlpool had grown slightly larger overnight, as though feeding on some hidden force beneath the lake. Clara scanned the area carefully. "Ethan, I've seen lakes with strong currents and hidden springs, but nothing like this." "This is unnatural," she said, her voice calm but serious. Ethan nodded. He had felt the same. Whatever lay beneath the surface was creating energy, manipulating the water in ways they could not yet understand. They decided to begin with a careful sonar scan. Ethan attached the sonar device to the rope and lowered it into the water near the center of the whirlpool. Clara watched over his shoulder as the readings appeared on the screen. Their eyes widened together as they saw the shape below, large, precise, and unmistakably man-made. This is not a natural formation," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's some kind of structure. Look at the angles, look at the edges, they're too straight." Ethan could hardly breathe. After decades of walking these shores, he had never imagined finding something like this. He made a note in his journal, recording the dimensions of the object and the depth at which it lay. They decided that the next step would be a closer look. Ethan prepared his diving suit while Clara checked the safety ropes and oxygen tanks. Diving into a lake like this was not without risks, especially when the water could be hiding sharp edges, debris, or even dangerous currents caused by the whirlpool. But Ethan felt a surge of determination. He would know the truth, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. Ethan entered the water carefully. The cold hit him immediately, but he pushed on, swimming toward the center of the whirlpool. The water tugged at him slightly, more than it should have, yet he managed to reach a point where he could hover and observe the murky depths below. Using a waterproof flashlight, he illuminated the bottom of the lake, and what he saw made his stomach tighten. A large metallic structure lay buried under layers of mud and silt. It looked old, rusted in places, but still intact, almost as if it had been preserved by the cold, deep waters of Silverpine Lake. The structure had what appeared to be doors and strange markings etched along the sides. Ethan could not recognize the symbols, but he felt a shiver of awe and curiosity. Whoever had built this had intended it to last, and perhaps intended for it to remain hidden. Carefully, he began to clear some of the mud with a small brush, revealing more of the metal surface. Clara watched from above, holding the rope steady. "Ethan, be careful," she said. "We don't know what's inside. There could be fragile equipment or something unstable." Ethan nodded, his heart racing. The thrill of discovery mixed with a caution he had learned over years as a ranger. After several tense minutes, the top of a hatch became visible. Ethan reached for it, testing its weight. It was heavy but not immovable. He signaled to Clara, who nodded in understanding. Together, they carefully worked to lift the hatch just enough to see inside. What they found took their breath away. Inside the structure was a small chamber, filled with equipment that looked like it had come from a science laboratory decades ago. Wires, dials, and strange instruments lined the walls. Papers and journals were stacked in waterproof containers, preserved under layers of mud. It was clear that someone had built this facility for a purpose, someone who had wanted to hide it deep under the lake, out of sight from the world. Ethan carefully reached for one of the journals. The pages were wet but still legible. As he opened it, he realized it contained detailed notes about experiments with water currents, energy, and mechanical devices. The handwriting was precise, almost obsessive, describing attempts to manipulate the lake's natural forces. Some diagrams showed the very whirlpool they were now observing, suggesting that the structure below had been designed to control or generate it. Clara leaned closer, reading over his shoulder. This is incredible," she whispered. They were experimenting with the lake itself, but why hide it? Why bury it? Ethan had no answer, but he felt the weight of the discovery pressing on him. This was more than a forgotten lab. It was a hidden chapter of history, a secret that had been preserved beneath the lake for decades. They spent hours documenting everything. Ethan took photos, recorded video, and made sketches. Every detail mattered. The structure was more complex than it first appeared. There were pipes leading deeper into the lake bed, suggesting that the facility extended below what they could see. The whirlpool above was likely connected to these underground channels, controlled by the machinery inside. As the day progressed, they decided to return to the surface and plan a proper investigation. They could not explore the entire facility in one day. It would take careful planning, more equipment, and possibly expert help. But they had confirmed what they had suspected. Silverpine Lake was hiding something extraordinary, something that had been untouched for decades, waiting for someone to uncover it. Back on shore, Ethan and Clara sat in silence for a moment, looking at the still-spinning whirlpool. It had not stopped. In fact, it seemed more pronounced than before. Ethan's mind raced with questions. Who had built this facility? What had they been trying to accomplish? And most importantly, what would happen if the whirlpool changed or if the machinery activated again? They decided to contact a few trusted scientists and historians, people who could help them understand what they had found. But before making any calls, they had to secure the area. Ethan made notes of safety protocols, marked the location of the whirlpool on the map, and set up temporary barriers along the shoreline. They could not risk anyone accidentally stumbling into the dangerous waters. That evening, Ethan sat in the ranger station, reviewing the data they had collected. The sonar readings, photographs, and notes filled his desk. He felt a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. This was unlike anything he had experienced in his years as a park ranger. Most days involved minor accidents, lost hikers, or maintenance tasks. Now he was part of a mystery that could rewrite the history of Silverpine Lake. As night fell, the forest around the lake seemed quieter than usual. The usual sounds of nocturnal animals were there, but muted, as if the lake itself held its breath. Ethan thought about the whirlpool, the submerged structure, and the strange journals they had found. He realized that the discovery could bring scientists, media, and curious visitors to the lake. If not handled carefully, it could be dangerous, not just for the public, but for the preservation of the hidden facility itself. Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Clara had returned to share her own observations. "I've been thinking," she said. "We need to plan this carefully. This is bigger than us. We need experts, engineers, historians, maybe even divers who specialize in underwater archaeology. We can't just rush in." Ethan agreed. They both understood that curiosity alone was not enough. This was a task that required careful preparation, respect for the past, and attention to safety. They spent the next few hours making lists. Equipment they would need, people they could contact, and precautions to take. They even discussed the possibility of monitoring the whirlpool with cameras to see if it changed during the night. Ethan felt a sense of responsibility, heavier than any patrol he had ever done. The lake had revealed its secret to him, and it was now his duty to protect it and uncover the truth safely. Before leaving the station, Ethan took one last look at the lake. The whirlpool continued to spin, a silent reminder of the mystery below. He felt a mix of fear and excitement. Whatever lay beneath the lake was no longer hidden from him, but its secrets were far from fully revealed. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more discoveries, and perhaps a closer look at the incredible facility buried in the depths of Silverpine Lake. Ethan and Clara drove back home in silence, each lost in thought. They both knew that their lives had changed forever. The ordinary routine of a park ranger's life was gone, replaced by the thrill of discovery, the burden of responsibility, and the promise of uncovering a secret that had been waiting for decades. The lake had chosen them as its witnesses, and there was no turning back. As the stars began to shine over Silverpine Lake that night, the whirlpool continued to spin, calm yet powerful, hiding the mysteries of the past beneath its dark, swirling waters. Ethan lay awake, imagining the next day, imagining the deeper secrets that awaited him, and wondering how far he was willing to go to uncover the truth. The morning air was sharp and cool, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth as Ethan Moore and Clara Jennings arrived at Silverpine Lake. Today was no ordinary morning. After their discovery of the whirlpool and the submerged structure, they had contacted a small team of experts, a marine engineer named Dr. Simon Hayes, a historian familiar with local legends named Margaret Lynn, and a professional underwater diver, Carlos Rivera. Each of them had arrived early, eager to witness the mystery firsthand, yet cautious of the risks involved. Ethan felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as he watched the experts unload their equipment. The boat, sonar devices, diving suits, and waterproof cameras were all ready. Clara went over the plan again, emphasizing safety first. "We know the whirlpool is stronger than it looks. Stay close to ropes and each other. No one goes down alone," she reminded the team. Everyone nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The lake shimmered in the early sunlight, its surface calm except for the whirling vortex at the center. It seemed alive, spinning slowly, pulling in leaves, sticks, and floating debris as if testing their patience. Ethan could not help but stare at it, feeling both awe and a tinge of fear. The whirlpool was no longer just an anomaly. It was a doorway into the unknown, a puzzle that demanded answers. Dr. Hayes, the marine engineer, knelt by the edge of the boat, studying the sonar readings from the previous day. "The structure beneath the lake is massive," he said. "It's clearly man-made, but also extremely old. The materials look reinforced, almost like it was built to last decades, maybe centuries. Whoever constructed this wanted it hidden, but also durable." Margaret Lynn, the historian, nodded thoughtfully. "There are old local legends about hidden facilities in these woods. Some talk about secret research projects during the mid-20th century, long before the park was officially established. It's possible this is one of those forgotten endeavors." Her voice carried a mix of excitement and caution. "If that's true, we could be looking at a piece of history no one has touched in decades." Ethan swallowed hard. The thrill of discovery surged through him, but he reminded himself to stay focused. This was not about fame or recognition. It was about uncovering the truth safely and respecting whatever lay beneath the lake. Clara gave the signal, and the team began preparing the first dive. Carlos Rivera, the professional diver, slipped into the water first, testing the strength of the current near the whirlpool. The water tugged at him, more forceful than expected but manageable. Using a rope anchored to the boat, he moved slowly toward the center, observing the swirling water. "The whirlpool's energy comes from below," he reported through his waterproof communication device. "Whatever is causing it is definitely mechanical or structural. It's not natural." Ethan watched the sonar screen as Carlos moved closer to the submerged structure. The images revealed more details than the previous day: pipes, mechanical components, and a network of chambers. Each corner of the structure was visible now, and the team could see that it extended deeper than they had imagined. The whirlpool was connected to something far larger, and its force seemed directly linked to the machinery hidden below. Once Carlos had made the initial survey, Ethan and Dr. Hayes joined him in the water, descending carefully to explore the main chamber. Clara and Margaret stayed above in the boat, monitoring the ropes and sonar readings. The team worked in silence, the only sounds being their breaths and the faint hum of underwater currents. The chamber was enormous, far larger than Ethan had imagined from the surface. Walls of reinforced metal rose from the lakebed, and strange machines lined every surface. Levers, dials, and switches, coated with layers of rust but still intact, suggested a level of engineering sophistication beyond what Ethan had expected. Some of the devices were clearly designed to control water flow and energy, which explained the whirlpool on the surface. Ethan carefully examined the journals they had recovered earlier. The entries described experiments in precise detail, manipulating water currents, generating energy through controlled whirlpools, and testing submerged machinery in isolated conditions. The handwriting was meticulous, almost obsessive, and it was clear the person who wrote it was driven by both scientific curiosity and secrecy. Margaret studied the symbols etched on the walls. These markings seemed like a combination of scientific notation and personal codes. Whoever built this didn't want the average person to understand it, but these journals might help decode the purpose of the machines. She smiled faintly, excitement shining in her eyes. "It's like finding a puzzle left for us to solve, Doctor." Hayes moved toward a large mechanism at the center of the chamber. "Look at this," he said. "This seems to be the main control unit. The whirlpool's strength is probably regulated from here. If we can understand this, we can see exactly how it works, and why it has been operating for so long without anyone noticing." Ethan felt a mixture of awe and unease. The potential of what they had found was staggering. This was not merely a hidden laboratory. It was a mechanical wonder, capable of shaping water currents in ways that could change ecosystems if misused. He also realized that even a small mistake could be dangerous. The whirlpool above was a reminder that the machinery still had power. The team worked carefully, documenting every machine, sketching diagrams, and taking photos. Ethan's attention was drawn to a smaller hatch at the far end of the chamber. Unlike the main entry, this hatch seemed older, almost forgotten. He signaled to Carlos, who carefully approached it. Ethan and Dr. Hayes joined him, slowly clearing the mud and debris that had built up over decades. When they finally opened the hatch, they found a narrow tunnel leading further down. The water was darker here, colder, and the current stronger. The team exchanged looks, knowing that going further would be risky but essential if they wanted to understand the facility fully. Clara and Margaret encouraged them to proceed cautiously, using all safety measures. Ethan led the way, moving slowly through the tunnel. The walls were lined with pipes and wires, and the space was tight but sturdy. As they advanced, the machinery became more complex, with dials and levers in configurations none of them had seen before. Ethan could not help but marvel at the ingenuity of the builders. Whoever had designed this had an incredible understanding of water dynamics and energy systems. At the end of the tunnel, they discovered another chamber, smaller than the main one, but filled with equipment that seemed experimental in nature. There were devices they could not immediately identify, some with glass tubes, some with mechanical arms that had long since stopped moving. A large journal lay open on a metal table, water-stained but legible. Ethan picked it up carefully, turning the pages. The entries here were different from the earlier journals. They described trials and observations, recording the effects of various configurations on water flow, whirlpool strength, and energy generation. Some pages contained sketches of strange devices and diagrams, showing energy distribution throughout the lake. Ethan realized that this facility had been more than just a laboratory. It had been a testing ground, a place where someone had experimented with forces that even today seemed advanced and mysterious. Dr. Hayes examined one of the devices. "These mechanisms are designed to interact with the natural currents," he explained. "They could create localized whirlpools, manipulate water pressure, and perhaps even store energy. It's impressive engineering for its time. Whoever built this facility was ahead of their era." As they continued exploring, Carlos pointed to a section of the chamber that seemed heavily reinforced. "There's something behind that wall," he said. "It looks like a vault or another sealed room. It might hold more journals or machinery. But it's old and could be unstable." Ethan nodded. They approached carefully, using ropes and specialized tools to test the integrity of the wall. After careful work, they discovered a small door hidden beneath layers of rust and mud. Inside was a collection of documents, blueprints, and small mechanical devices, preserved almost perfectly despite decades underwater. Margaret gasped. This is incredible." These could explain everything: the purpose of the facility, how it works, and why the whirlpool exists. It's a treasure trove of history and science. Ethan carefully cataloged everything, knowing that this discovery could change their understanding of Silverpine Lake forever. But even as they explored, he remained aware of the whirlpool above. The machinery below was still connected to it, and the energy it generated was not fully understood. Any sudden movement, any mistake, could activate it unpredictably. Hours passed as they documented, photographed, and mapped every part of the submerged structure. By the late afternoon, the team surfaced, exhausted but exhilarated. The whirlpool above the lake continued to spin, a silent reminder of the power hidden below. Ethan and Clara knew that they had uncovered something extraordinary, but they also understood that the full story was still hidden, waiting for them to piece it together. As they packed up, Margaret spoke quietly. "We have the chance to study this facility carefully. If we do it right, we can understand the technology, the history, and maybe even learn from it without disturbing the lake's natural balance." Ethan nodded. It was a delicate balance. They had discovered something extraordinary, but with great discovery came great responsibility. Driving back to the ranger station, Ethan and Clara reflected on the day's events. They had touched history, uncovered secrets, and glimpsed a world of science and engineering that had been hidden for decades. The whirlpool would continue to spin, and the lake would hold its secrets a little longer. but they had taken the first step into a story that would change their understanding of Silverpine Lake forever. That night, as stars dotted the sky above the forest, Ethan lay awake, thinking about the submerged chambers, the machinery, and the journals. He knew that the mystery was far from solved. The facility below the lake was only the beginning. There were questions that remained unanswered. Who had built it? Why? And what other secrets were waiting in the depths of Silverpine Lake? The whirlpool above the lake continued its silent spin, a guardian of hidden knowledge. Ethan closed his eyes, determined to continue the exploration safely, carefully, and with respect for the extraordinary secret they had uncovered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and perhaps a step closer to understanding the incredible mystery hidden beneath Silverpine Lake. The next morning, Silverpine Lake glimmered under a pale sunrise, the surface still smooth except for the swirling whirlpool that seemed to have a life of its own. Ethan Moore, Clara Jennings, and their team returned early, ready to continue the investigation of the submerged structure. Unlike the previous days, they were now armed with specialized equipment, including underwater cameras, sonar mapping devices, and reinforced diving suits. Today, they intended to uncover the full extent of the facility and, if possible, understand its original purpose. Ethan's heart beat faster as he approached the water. The whirlpool had grown slightly stronger overnight, a reminder that the machinery below the lake was still functional. He felt both excitement and caution. He had learned from the previous dives that this was not simply a historical relic. It was a living system, interacting with the water above in ways that were both beautiful and potentially dangerous. Clara checked the ropes, knots, and diving gear one more time, her eyes serious. "Remember," she said, "safety first. This is bigger than anything we've dealt with. The whirlpool might seem calm from here, but it is powerful, and the currents are unpredictable." Everyone nodded, fully aware of the risks. Carlos Rivera, the professional diver, entered the water first, as usual. He swam toward the whirlpool, tethered securely by a rope, while Dr. Simon Hayes followed with specialized sonar equipment to map the structure in greater detail. Ethan joined them next, feeling the familiar chill of the lake water against his skin, a mixture of shock and clarity that always accompanied a dive into the unknown. The deeper they went, the more the submerged structure revealed itself. The central chamber, the smaller experimental rooms, and the hidden tunnel from the previous day were all visible now through enhanced sonar and underwater lighting. The team carefully cataloged every detail, documenting the pipes, levers, and control mechanisms that connected the facility to the whirlpool above. Ethan paused near a control panel at the center of the main chamber. The panel was partially covered in mud and silt, but some of the switches and dials were still intact. He carefully brushed away the debris, revealing markings that looked like instructions or settings. The thought that this machinery had operated unattended for decades fascinated him. Whoever built it had left it to function without human presence, and the whirlpool above was proof of its lasting power. Margaret Lynn, observing from above the water, pointed to a series of markings along the walls. "These symbols are part technical, part personal," she said. "They may indicate settings, dates, or the order in which experiments were conducted. If we can understand them, we might unlock the secrets of the facility completely." Dr. Hayes studied a large cylindrical device connected to the control panel. "This appears to be the main generator," he said. "It converts the energy from water movement into mechanical force, which is likely what drives the whirlpool. But it's unlike anything I've ever seen in modern engineering. Whoever built this understood the natural forces of the lake in ways we're just beginning to grasp." Ethan felt a shiver of awe. The more he examined the machinery, the more he realized the complexity and ingenuity involved. This was not just a secret laboratory. It was a system capable of controlling the natural dynamics of the lake, influencing currents, pressure, and perhaps even energy storage. It was remarkable and slightly intimidating. The team moved carefully toward a sealed chamber at the far end of the main structure. The door was rusted but reinforced with metal, suggesting it had been designed to withstand pressure and decay. Carlos and Ethan worked together to open it, using special tools to avoid damaging the structure. Slowly, the door creaked open, revealing a room filled with mechanical devices and documents preserved remarkably well under the water. Inside, they found a collection of journals, blueprints, and small instruments. Ethan gingerly picked up a large journal, its pages damp but readable. The handwriting was precise, describing the final experiments conducted in the facility. The entries explained how the machinery had been calibrated to create whirlpools of varying size and intensity, and how these whirlpools could store and release energy in controlled ways. Margaret leaned over to read. "This is incredible." They weren't just experimenting, they were inventing new ways to manipulate water as a power source. They might have been trying to create sustainable energy or study natural currents for research purposes. She looked at Ethan with excitement. And all of this was hidden here under the lake, completely untouched until now. Ethan carefully turned the pages of another journal, which contained sketches of deeper tunnels and control mechanisms. Some diagrams even suggested mechanisms that could influence not just the lake's whirlpool, but water flow in connected rivers and streams. He realized that the facility's potential impact extended far beyond Silverpine Lake. Dr. Hayes examined one of the devices more closely. "This is a feedback system," he explained. "It senses water flow and automatically adjusts the machinery to maintain the whirlpool's size and strength." Essentially, the facility was designed to run on its own, correcting itself without human input. The implications were staggering. Ethan felt a mix of pride and fear. Pride in the discovery, fear at the potential consequences if the technology was misused or malfunctioned. Carlos pointed to a hatch at the back of the room. "There might be one more section," he said. "It looks reinforced and completely sealed. If we want to understand the full purpose of this facility, we need to see what's inside." Ethan nodded, and with careful coordination, they worked to open the hatch. Slowly, the door gave way, revealing a final chamber that had been completely preserved. The chamber was smaller, almost like a control room. Screens, levers, and instruments lined the walls. Some appeared to be designed to monitor energy levels and water flow, while others seemed experimental, with unknown purposes. In the center of the room was a chair, slightly rusted but intact, suggesting that someone had once sat here to operate or observe the facility directly. Ethan ran his hand over the control panel. A small lever, surprisingly intact, clicked under his touch. Immediately, there was a subtle shift in the whirlpool above the lake. The water spun slightly faster, small ripples spreading outward. The team froze, realizing for the first time that the machinery still worked, even after decades underwater. Margaret's voice trembled with awe. "It's still functional after all this time. They built this to last, and it has endured the years hidden beneath the lake." Ethan nodded, understanding that this discovery was far more than historical. It was a testament to human ingenuity, a bridge between science and mystery that had remained untouched for generations. Dr. Hayes suggested mapping the entire facility and documenting every mechanism before making any changes. "We need to understand this fully," he said. "Even minor adjustments could have major effects. This is not just history, it's active technology." Ethan agreed, realizing the importance of careful, methodical work. Over the next several hours, the team meticulously mapped the chambers, cataloged devices, and took detailed notes of every observation. They discovered additional tunnels, some leading to smaller, experimental chambers, and others appearing to be storage areas for tools and instruments. The scale of the facility was far larger than anyone had imagined, and the complexity of the machinery suggested that it had been designed by a highly skilled team of engineers and scientists. As the day progressed, the team began to piece together the purpose of the facility. It had been designed to experiment with water energy, whirlpool dynamics, and environmental control. The journals suggested that the original scientists had intended to use the technology for research and perhaps for energy generation. But for reasons unknown, the facility had been abandoned and hidden beneath the lake, left to operate silently for decades. Ethan realized that the whirlpool above was not simply a natural phenomenon. It was a direct result of the machinery below. The energy it generated and the movement of the water were all controlled by the mechanisms they had uncovered. The facility was not only a historical artifact, but a functional system, a bridge between the past and the present. As they prepared to surface, the team agreed to install remote monitoring equipment to track the whirlpool and machinery over time. This would allow them to study the facility without disturbing its delicate balance. Ethan felt a sense of responsibility. The lake had entrusted them with its secret, and it was now their duty to preserve it, study it carefully, and protect it from misuse. Back on shore, the team reviewed their findings. Margaret and Dr. Hayes were both amazed at the precision and foresight of the original builders. "This facility represents a remarkable achievement," Dr. Hayes said. "It combines history, science, and engineering in a way that is truly ahead of its time." Margaret added, "And now it is up to us to ensure that it is studied responsibly. The potential is enormous, but so is the risk if it falls into the wrong hands." Ethan nodded, looking out over the lake. The whirlpool continued its gentle spin, calm yet powerful, a living reminder of the secrets that lay beneath. For the first time in decades, the lake had been understood, at least partially, and its story was beginning to be told. But Ethan knew that the full story would take years to uncover. The facility was vast, complex, and still filled with mysteries waiting to be revealed. As night fell over Silverpine Lake, the forest was silent, the water reflecting the stars above. Ethan sat by the shore, thinking about the journey they had taken, from the first sight of the whirlpool to the discovery of the hidden chambers and the functional machinery below. He felt a profound respect for the unknown, for the ingenuity of the original builders, and for the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. The whirlpool continued to spin, steady and silent, a guardian of the lake's secrets. Ethan knew that the discovery had changed everything, not just for him, Clara, and the team, but for Silverpine Lake itself. Its story, long hidden beneath layers of water and time, had finally been uncovered. And as he watched the water glow under the moonlight, he realized that this was only the beginning of understanding the incredible legacy that lay beneath the surface. The lake had revealed its secret, and in doing so, it had connected the past and the present, science and mystery, human curiosity and the natural world. Ethan felt a sense of awe, gratitude, and purpose. The whirlpool above was no longer just a phenomenon. It was a symbol of discovery, endurance, and the profound mysteries waiting to be explored. And as the stars reflected in the still, dark water, Ethan knew one thing clearly. Silverpine Lake had chosen him as its witness, and its story would continue to unfold, revealing wonders that no one had imagined for decades.